We know it's just about the only thing in the news recently, but today we are not going to focus on the tragedies in Paris or Ankara or Beirut, though our hearts go out to all those affected. If Jonathan Larson is right that the opposite of war isn't peace, but instead creation, then we're going to try to contribute in the smallest of ways by sticking to what we're good at, helping you, our entrepreneurial listeners, create.
Welcome to StartupJab.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 16 of StartupJab, Love What You Do. I, of course, am one of your two illustrious hosts, Jason Ellis. With me, as always, the Mozart to my Beethoven, Teague Hopkins. Yeah,
nice.
I like that one.
I like that one. That's a good one.
Thank you. Teague, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty well.
Yeah.
Yes. Catch me in the middle of drinking water. Some of you may be able to hear the chainsaw outside my window. Hopefully it's not too loud on the microphone, but I'll try to mute myself when I'm not talking.
Nah, you'll be all right, I'm sure. This week's episode is going to be all about you and your challenges. We've got a couple articles here that we're going to reference and discuss, but we want to hear from you. So for those of you who are listening to us live and enjoying the lovely Blab interface, you can leave us a chat or even jump in as we start to open up questions. But before we do, I'd love to jump in on a couple of different articles that have come across. In fact, one for our very own, I don't believe she's live with us at the moment, but our very own Kiki Scher from CMO of Fitter, who has a great article about the entrepreneurial power of embarrassment. In here now, just so everybody has it. And the article is, first of all, it opens with a picture of somebody with a Groucho Marx mask, which I'm always a fan of personally. But it's actually a subject that, Teague, you and I have discussed a couple of times here regarding failure and embarrassment and that constant state of discomfort. In fact, it's specific in this article to product launches, but I think it's actually as a larger subject, a very important one. Would you agree? Yeah, absolutely. I think, in a lot of ways, you're only learning when you're staying at the edge of your comfort zone, right? If you're doing things where you have no level of embarrassment at all because you're already an expert, you don't continue to grow and you don't continue to learn, and you end up, stagnating. Absolutely. Well, I think too that there's always the challenge that you want to build, you want to grow, you want to get to that place that you feel like you've hit success, and then people want to hold on to that for as long as possible. And I think when you do, you often find yourself in that place of trying to keep the status quo when you once had drive and ambition and wanted to build things, and instead you end up becoming the very thing you hate. Sort of a Luke Skywalker meets Darth Vader kind of action, right? Right. That's accurate.
Exactly. That's exactly how it goes. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Lucasfilm is going to send me a cease and desist momentarily.
It's not Lucasfilm anymore. It's Disney.
They're a subsidiary. Technically, it still exists, right? Sure.
Okay. I guess that's probably.
Are we going to see? Are we going to see the Disney castle in front of Star Wars? That's my question.
Ooh. I don't know if I can handle that. That's a little weird.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Anyway, for those of you who are listening live, you should check out the article. For those of you who are podcasting us, check out the show notes for it. I think personally, as somebody who got his start embarrassing himself on stage in front of people he didn't know, I actually think it's an incredibly important skill to learn. I think that we oftentimes feel the need to cocoon ourselves to get into that safe place. And I think if you're going to be any kind of a business person, even if you don't own your own business, you have to be just comfortable with that constant discomfort, that you have to embrace it and be okay with it. Yeah, and I think the Kiki quotes from, I think it's Reid Hoffman, about the first version of your products, and if you're not embarrassed by it, then you waited too long to launch it. And I think that's great advice for a lot of entrepreneurs, that when you are working on something in a little bubble, you can keep working on it and keep making it better and better, but until you actually put it out there and have first contact with the customer, you have no idea whether you're making it better or worse or just going in circles. So absolutely. I think it's very good advice. Yeah, there's a my part of my family, my extended family, I should say, is from Peru, and there's a saying in Peru, "Sinvergüenza," which means you are without shame, and it's usually meant to like mock you, like you're dancing around there like you're right, you're dancing around, you can get the two buttons undone on your shirt, you're sinvergüenza. But the truth is that actually, I think it's actually a source of pride. I mean, that sense that I don't have shame. Why would I be shamed about this? Why would I feel badly? But,
yeah, well, I think that's fantastic. I mean, I think the other thing that it makes me think of is branching out from being embarrassed about your products a little bit, talking about shame in the perspective of folks like Brene Brown, who's done a lot of work on shame and the human desire for belonging. Right. I think a lot of our difficulties stem from trying to avoid shame and embarrassment, and if you're able to, embrace them instead, you have a whole lot more freedom and a whole lot more, peace, really. And so,
absolutely.
Good on you for practicing that early. I think you may have a head start on the rest of them.
I've been practicing that my whole life. When you're the kid who legitimately trips in the cafeteria and falls face first into his food, you learn quickly that the correct response is not to get embarrassed and run away, but to stand up and take an appropriate and very long bow. Which
very nice. Yeah.
Then you go into the corner and cry. I mean, for years, just years of tears. Oh gosh. Anyway, not that this is therapy for me,
but so many bows too, right?
Oh, no,
bring joy and entertainment to millions of people.
Millions. I don't know that I've ever entertained millions. We don't have subscriber numbers that are quite that high yet. Maybe one day.
Yet.
The other thing I want to make sure that we mention today, there is an effort currently underway at Congress to institute a National Entrepreneurs Day. Congress has already acknowledged an Entrepreneurs Month, I believe. But an effort is actually underway. In fact, I believe Cory Booker introduced it on the House floor today, a resolution, I think it's HR 511. Yeah, House Resolution 511 to create and institutionalize an official National Entrepreneurs Day. This would not be a vacation holiday because let's face it, all entrepreneurs would be at work anyway.
They don't get those anyway, yeah, right?
No, holidays. It's a legal obligation as far as we're concerned. But it's an interesting effort. I posted a link. For those of you listening via podcast, you'll have to check it out afterwards. But it's an interesting, I think, it's an interesting idea to codify the startup economy in an actual day by recognizing entrepreneurs and the effect entrepreneurs have on the larger economy. What do you think?
I believe, in fact, that they're proposing the third Tuesday in November, which is today.
Today would be it.
Yes. So today would be Entrepreneurs Day.
Well, today, November 17th, 2015. Let's be clear.
Yes. Right. Yeah. For those of you who are not listening live.
Right.
Yeah. So that's kind of cool. Today would be Entrepreneurs Day, which is, like neat. Wednesday, Thursday, Entrepreneurs Day, Friday. Yeah.
Well, Monday, Entrepreneurs Day, Wednesday, but yeah.
Yeah. Right. Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's an interesting concept. I think that there's a lot of important recognition that we need, to bestow upon entrepreneurs. I think one of the challenges is that, does this mean we've made it? Are we official now?
I don't know. I'm not sure that we as entrepreneurs need any more recognition. We tend to get a lot of that, a lot of sort of, puff pieces from the mainstream media and a lot of cheerleading and a lot of like, isn't entrepreneurship great, to the degree where like lots of people sort of want to be entrepreneurs without actually wanting to be entrepreneurs, by which I mean like people want to be called an entrepreneur to call themselves an entrepreneur without actually taking on the challenges and the pain that comes along with it.
So what you mean is wantrepreneurs.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
You hate me a little for that, don't you?
No, that's good. That's good. I don't hate you at all, Jason. You're wonderful.
Oh, well, that's really sweet of you to say. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think the one thing that's important to me is that, recognizing that the current drive towards entrepreneurship, not only the economic impact that it's having, but also the social impact. I mean, the fact that being an entrepreneur has social credit in a way that it might not have 10 or 20 years ago. I think it's important to recognize. I also think it's important to realize that this is a wave. This is not the new economy forever. This will change eventually, and we'll be fascinated with some other construct of the economy, unicorns, and maybe that'll become everybody's obsession. I don't know. I'm just saying that, for many years, being a small business owner is how we called it instead of a startup founder or an entrepreneur or something like that.
Well, when in truth, and some folks would also draw a distinction between those as well, right? I mean,
sure. Yeah. Well, I suppose you're a small business owner if you're, you own a lumber yard that you just started, but it also makes you an entrepreneur. So I think it ends up being sort of a false division in a lot of ways because they've always been the same thing. We just pretend that entrepreneur means something in technology or something in internet or something social or IoT or something like that.
Yeah, I'm not particularly concerned with labels, but I want to acknowledge that there are people who are. And
agreed. Yeah. Well, there's a question in the chat that I think is worth addressing. Marcus is asking, is the brick and mortar small businessman or woman being pushed away, and are the entrepreneurs coming online? That's a good question. I think that brick and mortar is actually in some ways making a comeback, at least in the city. I think that there's a lot of businesses that, like Warby Parker is a great example of a larger business that went online retail first before they went brick and mortar. I think it's more a matter of, I don't know. I think it's more a matter of, is brick and mortar right for your audience? And technically speaking, I run an agency. We could all be distributed. We don't need a physical space the way that, other businesses might, but it actually benefits us to have it. So who knows? So
do you think that the division between brick and mortar and online is still a real thing? Or do you think it's a false dichotomy because, every business is online now. Every business is a tech company, right? Everything uses technology to some degree. And whether you have a physical presence or not,
that's a good question.
Yeah.
I've been saying that a lot today. These are all good questions. It's redundant to say it. I think that there is a division in the sense, I think that there still should be a division in the sense that it defines your early strategy. But given that some businesses need to be brick and mortar, whereas others can choose to be brick and mortar, would be the division I would make. But no, in the end, it's all small business, hopefully growing into large business. And the term entrepreneur, actually deservedly so, belongs to everybody who starts one, at least in my mind. Whether you keep it or not, or whether you actually use your powers for good and not evil, that's up to you.
Use your powers for good or for awesome?
For gooder or from awesomer. Yeah. Anyway. I mean, look.
I'm inclined to let anybody who wants to use the label entrepreneur use the label entrepreneur. I'm all for letting people define their own labels because, why should somebody else decide what you call yourself?
I actively don't call myself an entrepreneur. I actually don't like that term for me because I don't feel like one. I don't know how else to phrase it. But to me, an entrepreneur is somebody who's going out, in my personal definition, this is not one that I would express for everybody, but that feeling to me is somebody who's going out and really sort of branching out and doing sort of building and setting their own path. For me, my business is just my business. And that just was sort of a natural extension of where I needed to go. It wasn't because I developed or designed some brilliant product or service that the world needed to know about. So I don't know. It is, you're right, it's personal and it's, I don't think as ubiquitous as we sometimes, I don't think it's as ubiquitous as it should be, but I also wonder if maybe we're redefining the word a little bit.
Do you think that if we get a entrepreneurship day that anything will actually change? Will it actually have an impact at all? Or is it simply it's a symbolic gesture that, everybody can kind of agree on because entrepreneurs grow the economy. And so you can get a nice bipartisan bill passed that is inoffensive to everybody?
That one. I think that I don't think that it does anything meaningful. I think it's very nice. And I don't say that to be mean. I think that in the end, you can use it as a rallying point, but it doesn't by itself change or define anything differently than it currently always exists. So I think my coffee kicked in because I just found myself like blurting. Yeah, I got to stop drinking straight black coffee. Anyway.
Sure. I don't do coffee, so I can't relate, but
you don't drink coffee?
Whatever you say.
What is wrong with you? We used to be friends. I don't know what happened. Gosh. Yeah. I'm sorry, guys. It's truthfully, Teague and I don't like to fight in front of the kids like this. It's not polite.
As long as we're just fighting about coffee. Yeah.
Exactly.
So one of the things that I came across this, maybe not actually this week, but last week, I think, is an article about how nobody cares how hard you work. I think this is relevant in our discussion of entrepreneurship and in loving what you do. Let me get the link for this article and put it into the chat for those of you listening live. There's a couple things that I liked out of this article. One of the main ones, and I think sort of the point that I came back to, was this idea that in too many workplaces, the way that effort is measured or the way that commitment is measured and value is measured is by effort, and so effort is often substituted by long hours, right? Being, if you work long and you're in the office early to late, you're first in line for a promotion, right? When in fact, if you can do your job brilliantly, let's see, I have the quote here is, in fact, though, if you can do your job brilliantly and still leave at 3 p.m. each day, a really good boss shouldn't object. The key there being, a really good boss, which we know those are few and far between, right?
Right.
And so like the title of the article is Nobody Cares How Hard You Work. And I think really maybe it should be nobody should care how hard you work, but they do anyway because psychology, right? Because we're humans. Sure.
Well, interestingly, I mean, this harkens back for me. I'm playing old man Nellis here today. When I was an acting student.
Excellent.
Yeah, exactly. When I was an acting student many years ago, I had an acting teacher who was a former Marine and whose father was a gymnastics coach. And he was this guy was out there. He was a mime. I mean, he was actually like a legitimate, like one of the authoritative subject experts in mime. This guy was bizarre. But one of the things I loved about him was that everybody else had acting class in the afternoon. My class started at 8 o'clock with the first hour being solely dedicated to workout and calisthenics. This guy would make us jumping jacks, run in place, push-ups, the whole shebang. And the first time that you do it, first time, I mean, you've got 30 kids who, just come from summer. They've been drinking with their friends all summer. Nobody's been like working out at the gym in preparation for this. You got all these kids in workout clothes and we're just, oh God. And the very first thing he says after, at the end of it is, we're done and we're resting. And he goes, I want everybody to stop it. I don't want to hear your breathing. I don't want to hear how hard it was. I don't care how tough it was. I don't care. Stop it. And at first we were all like, that's the most heartless thing you could possibly say. But in fact, what he was trying to evoke was the fact that he doesn't care how hard we worked. He wanted the results. He just wanted to know that we were doing the thing. And so over time, as we continued to do these ridiculous morning workouts and eventually got to the actual acting part, like what he was trying to instill upon us was this sense that nobody really should care how much effort you put in. Like you don't hand in an Excel sheet and go, oh God, these formulas took me forever. Nobody cares. They just want to know that the Excel sheet is done.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the other things that the article talked about is when you're making a case for a raise or for a promotion, you don't cite the effort that you put in, you cite the results that you got out. Right. You talk about all your successes, you talk about the things that you have achieved, you talk about the things that you have gotten done for the company, not how many hours you've been in the office, right? Like the problem is that, that's what you talk about, but in a lot of organizations, people still see when you show up in the morning, when you leave in the afternoon, whether your jacket is still on your chair when they leave at the end of the day, and then they assume, oh, well, that person must be doing great work because they're here all the time. They must be working so hard and achieving so much.
I agree.
And,
yeah. Well, as Marcus is saying in the chat here, hours don't mean much. It really is. It's what the accomplishment is. And I think that we sometimes equate the two. And I've said this to my team. I don't care if they work from 11 to 3. If the job magically gets done in 4 hours, more power to you. I mean, stick around and help us do other stuff too, but whatever. Like,
yeah. And the challenge, of course, is that hours are easy to measure.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I think people are oftentimes fooled into thinking that by showing how hard they're working and by putting in those extra hours, that matters to someone. When the truth of the matter is we're also filled with our own stuff. My bosses have never noticed, they notice that I work hard, but they've never gone, boy, you stayed the extra 2 hours. They don't know that. They're gone. It's not like I log hours,
Yeah.
Yeah. Work
well,
harder.
and I think the other piece of it that's kind of insidious is, we've all had those days where at the end of the day, you're like, oh man, I'm exhausted. I got so much done today. It was such a productive day. And we may actually be fooling ourselves, right? If we're the article talks about, if you're judging your output by your tiredness, you're probably misleading yourself, because tiredness does not necessarily correlate with productivity, right? If you did, if you got that one thing done and it took you 10 minutes and then you went for a walk and like hung out and napped the rest of the day, you are still more productive than if you spent the entire day doing busy work, right? You get into that loop of check Facebook, check Twitter, check LinkedIn, check email, check Facebook, check Twitter, etc. Right? Yeah. And you get nothing done, but it feels like you're being productive because you're churning through all these things. You're arbitraging, you're doing triage on your inbox. Triage is what I meant, not arbitrage. Different thing.
I wasn't going to correct you. This is too much fun.
I'll correct myself. Thanks.
There you go. Yeah. I don't know. I think you're right. And I think too that in the end, nobody, no entrepreneur gets to get an award for having worked most hours. If you're not productive, if you don't do it right, it doesn't matter. And that does apply up the scale too. So your phone's tweeting again. Damn it!
I know. I don't know
we
what
talked
it
about
is.
this.
We did talk about it. I even said this before we started the show. I said I'm silencing my phone now.
I'm sorry. Look, ladies and gentlemen, I hate to announce it, but I'm going to have to fire Teague for not being productive. I don't have that authority. I don't have that ability, but I'm going to do it anyway for the good of StartupJab, right here and now.
I reject your firing.
We could have a whole conversation about authority, giving and taking. It's not philosophy 101. We can't do that. Anyway.
Yes. So, and then one last point from the article before we should move on to the next thing is, there's a story in there, which is, one of many, that we've probably all heard about a business person talking about how his customers felt cheated because, the effort that the time it took him to do the job was so little, and there was so little effort, but he charged so much for it. And the story it always makes me think of is the guy they bring in to diagnose what's wrong with this, multi-million-dollar machine. And he, comes in, listens to the machine, pulls out a hammer, taps on it in one place, and it starts right up and works just fine. Yeah. And he says, okay, that'll be $100,000. And they said, what do you mean $100,000? You came in with a hammer and just like tapped on the machine and it worked. He said, yes, it's $1 to tap on it with the hammer. It's $999,999 to know where to tap. Right.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of artists and creatives who they laugh when people ask them if they want to do free work for exposure. It's like, no. I did the free work. It was called my education. You gonna pay me now. Like, I think, that gets into a whole other thing about valuing work. And I had this argument with another business owner a couple of months ago where they only charge hourly. They will not take on a project. They won't do a project fee. They won't do a monthly retainer. They will only charge based on the hour. Whereas I have never taken a job for hourly rate, not as an entrepreneur, not as a startup founder. I can't call myself an entrepreneur now. I just said that. But no, I just
you can change your mind. It's okay.
Apparently, I think that you put the value into the work itself, not the value into the time it took. You end up maybe assuming a bit more of the risk in terms of the amount of effort it's going to take. But in the end, you're telling people, you don't care how long it takes me. You just want the end result. That's what you're paying for. And it's worth the training.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's our 2 cents in the matter. Yeah. Anyway, yes, I contradict myself constantly. It's how I roll. Yeah, that's how we roll. Another article that I thought was interesting that you posted was the perfect startup team. Well, or excuse me, rather a question that you
question,
posed.
Yeah, question from the mailbag.
Yeah.
We had a question about founders, or actually we had a couple questions, and I sort of summarized them into what is the perfect startup team, and in particular, folks were asking questions about the technical versus business co-founders, and if you're starting a tech startup, does everybody need to know how to write code? And and then also the question of, when you're hiring beyond that first startup team, do you hire people based on their talent or based on their enthusiasm or some combination of both? And there's probably a lot of different answers to this one, but we'll give you ours, I guess. Jason, what's your perfect founding team?
They have to have, I would say they have to have three qualities. Honesty. So there has to be a sense of openness and a reasonable expectation that we're going to be upfront with ourselves and each other. Integrity. I think that they have to be upstanding. I think they have to be the kind of people that go beyond and everybody can talk about how I want somebody I can go drinking with and somebody I can suffer long nights with. Like, that's all well and good, but I want somebody who I know who's going to do the hard things.
Mm-hmm.
But the third of it, and you're going to laugh at this, but the third is a sense of humor, comedy, a sense that, when we are working those long hours and it does suck, that they're still going to have a good sense of humor of things. And I think that honestly, it's more important than anything else that those three things be satisfied first. Because I think great hair is very important, as CJ is pointing out. Just saying. Same hairline since I was 16.
So yeah, as CJ is pointing out, honesty, integrity, sense of humor, great hair. Does that sound like anybody we know?
Guys, I'm not that honest, and I don't have that much integrity, but I got the other two, so that works. I hope that's not true. Good Lord. But no, those are the qualities that I absolutely look for. I mean, without them, nothing else matters. That's my feeling on it. What about you?
I am not going to disagree with any of that, but I will offer a different perspective. So We've talked about the qualities for each of the founders. I'll talk a little bit about the skill sets.
Sure.
And I think the sort of most common answer is the hacker, hustler, designer triumvirate, right? Or trinity, the holy trinity of startup founders, I guess. Where you have, one person who's the hacker is the person who's building the product, who's writing the code, who's handling the technology side of things. The designer is the person who is not just doing the visual design, the graphic design, but also the user experience design, designing the interaction with the customer, figuring out how that goes from first contact to value delivery and on. And the hustler, the business person who is going out and making sales and closing deals and marketing and bringing in customers and all those things. And I think that's, that it's not my, I'm not the first one to give that answer, but I certainly agree with it.
I know which one I am. Which one are you?
That is a good question. I have been each of those things in different organizations, I think. I am probably, it's a really hard question. You're clearly a hustler.
Oh, without a doubt. I am such a
you're a consummate hustler.
I think, thank you. I don't know.
No, it's definitely a good thing. Yeah.
I'll take it. Yeah. I don't know.
I've played that role. I don't know that it's my favorite role. I've been the hacker. I've been the designer. I think, I'm a bit of a polymath. I'm too much of everything to be useful to anybody but a startup.
Oh, I don't know that that's true, but I mean, well, I don't think we need to go into the details of you and your work and all that jazz. But I mean, I think that therapy. Actually,
right.
Not therapy, right? It's not therapy. I was told years ago, acting is not therapy. Startup is not therapy either. No, I think that in truth, I mean, if we're talking about skill sets, I look for people, whether, founders or people to hire. I think being a jack of all trades is absolutely important. Whether, you should have a specialty in at least one or two. I mean, there's something that you need to start with. But particularly when, you're less than, let's say, 20 people, you need to be able to wear 5 or 6 absolutely. And be okay with that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's T-shaped people, right? With the broad skill sets and depth in one. And speaking of wearing different hats, we can, I'm going to geek out about organizational design again. If you're, creating a startup, it's useful to think about what the functions are that you need to address. And that can be separate from who you have in the founding team, right? So it's not that in order to start, you have to have that you have to have a hacker, hustler, and designer.
For our podcast listeners, that was totally not generated by any sort of machine. That was Teague and Teague's mouth effects. I don't even know what the hell to call that. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
I think that's beatboxing, right?
Sure.
We'll go with that.
Because you're a beatboxer.
We'll go with that. Yeah. Just because you have 3 people doesn't mean you have to assign one of them to each of those, right? You may find that actually you have a gap in one of those things, and you have maybe two hackers and a designer and no hustler, and so someone's going to wear that hustler hat for the time being. But if you separate that out, you're not forcing people to commit to a role that is not their ideal role. You separate out the plan of the organizational structure from the people that you have on hand at that exact moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too that as roles change and grow and develop, people can jostle from one to the next. I mean, if you're a technical co-founder and you find eventually that you want to hand a lot of that off to somebody else and be the hustler or something in that vein, I mean, that's the flexibility is the important thing, particularly early on. As time moves on, it gets harder to make those shifts. Those lateral jumps become a lot more complicated, but there's certainly some opportunity there for all of that. So, I think the cool thing about it is you do get to play the different roles. You just have to have somebody who's really good at least one of them early on.
Yeah. Yeah. So the second part of that question was, do you hire someone for talent or for enthusiasm? And we're going to answer that, but we're going to do that after we take a short break to hear from our sponsors. This episode of StartupJab is brought to you in part by... Right now, in crisis areas around the world, like Afghanistan, the Central African Republic, the DRC, South Sudan, and Syria, Doctors Without Borders is delivering emergency medical care, treating patients in critical need in nearly 70 countries. Doctors Without Borders is saving a life somewhere right now. Your support makes their work possible. Donate now at doctorswithoutborders.org. Funding for this episode was also provided by listeners like you. And we're back. We're going to talk now about whether you hire somebody for talent or for enthusiasm. So when you're getting past that first co-founding team, what do you look for? And Jason is focusing on the chat room, so I'm going to grab his attention now.
No, I'm listening.
What do you focus on, Jason?
Well, my focus. I always focus on me. Talent versus enthusiasm. You need both. As you grow, enthusiasm is great, and there are some roles where you can put somebody who is more enthusiastic than specifically talented in an area. For example, if you're a big tech company and you want to bring somebody in because you think that they're going to be a good investment for a while, you bring them in as a executive assistant or a coordinator for the technology team or something like that. But in truth, they're both equally important. Talent is, you have to be able to do the job and you have to be able to do it enthusiastically. And if you're missing the enthusiasm, you can skate by for a while, but you're not going to be happy. You're not going to feel good about what you're doing. And by the same token, you can feel as enthusiastic as possible. And if you can't do the job, you're not going to last very long. And the company probably won't last long because they'll have hired the wrong people for the wrong jobs.
So you're going to give me the cop-out answer of both.
I'm going to give you the honest answer of both with my integrity and my sense of humor and even my great hair. If you have to pick one, I guess talent. But even saying that doesn't feel complete. I think that you really do need to find people. If you want to succeed, you have to do your very best to find people who fit both. If you absolutely have to pick one, then you have to ask yourself the question in that situation, which is better for me, somebody who's talented or somebody who's enthusiastic who will work 14 hours to get it done.
So if you are, let's say you're not picking one or the other, but you're prioritizing, right? If you have two great candidates, one of them is a little more enthusiastic than the other, but the other one's a little more talented. Which one?
You pick the one. In that instance, you pick the enthusiastic one, hands down. If all things are generally equal in terms of talent and enthusiasm, and one is a little bit higher than the other, I go for the enthusiastic one. If there isn't as much of a chasm to jump over, you can teach somebody to do something better, but you can't teach enthusiasm. If they're not excited about it from the get-go, it's much harder to find. Would you agree?
I would, and I think similarly, I would agree on the difference between talent and cultural fit, and in fact even more so, right? I think if someone's not a cultural fit, it doesn't matter how talented they are. It's this is the no assholes rule, right?
Yeah.
You don't want people in your company who are dragging everybody else down, even if they are a brilliant individual contributor.
Well, and the truth of the matter is, then you get into questions of ego, and you get into questions of role and rank and superiority, and then it becomes a culture fight, and you don't want that. When I have seen those things happen, everyone loses. There is no winner in that battle. So, I'm with you on that one. I think I don't know. I think that there are a lot of companies that struggle with this for a very long time. It's kind of the thing that never goes away. And
it keeps shifting, right? As you get each time the company goes through the inflection point that is often denoted by one of Dunbar's numbers, you have to reevaluate the way that you're hiring and the way that you are evaluating culture and what the culture is and where it's going and what you want it to be. And that's that is the job of senior management of an organization as much as anything else is getting the right people into the company and getting them in the right seats. And a big piece of getting those right people is getting people who continue to move the culture in the direction that you want the culture to move in. Because if you move the culture in another direction, away from the one that fits with your mission and fits with what you're trying to do, it makes everything else a lot harder.
Yes, indeed. Since I'll be the one who will be honest about it, who is Dunbar and how should I know him?
Dunbar is most well known for Dunbar's number, which is suggested as the limit of the number of people that you can actually have relationships with. So it's often quoted as 150. What most people don't know is that Dunbar actually published several other, published a string of research on this, where there are several different numbers that are sort of the limits for level of relationships. So 150 is often the
close number,
the number of people that you can have in a close group, in a friend group sort of thing, in an organization that all trust each other and know each other. There are smaller numbers for the number of people that you would consider close friends, the people who you would rely on all the time, or slightly larger, like extended family, and then even beyond 150, going up to things like, I think 500 is the limit of the number of people who you can know something about them. And then there's another number, I'm forgetting exactly what they are, but
5,000, which is the number of Facebook friends we can have.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
obviously.
In fact, there is one around that's like the number of faces that we can recognize, right?
Boy, there is my problem right there.
There's that limit between like knowing the names and like being able to recognize the face, and the ones that make one of those but not the other is those are the people you run into on the street and you're like, hey, you.
Yeah, that's my thing. I'm better at recognizing faces. I don't remember names quite as often, at least the first couple of times I meet someone. I imagine that if I were a teacher, that the beginning of every school year would be a nightmare for me trying to learn, a couple hundred students' names.
Yeah. Out the cheat sheet. Yeah. So here we go. Here's the actual numbers. It's 5 is the limit for friends or family in a close support group. 15 is the limit for friends you can confide in. 50 is close friends. 150 is casual friends. 500 is acquaintances, and 1500 is being able to put names to faces. So beyond 1500 is when you start recognizing faces but not being able to remember the person's name.
God, no wonder my brain explodes. My job is to meet new people. I need like the Jason Ellis Facebook. So we had a question I want to make sure we get to.
Yes.
The question was about, it was about college students, and specifically that if we had any advice on startups, relating to college students. And I'm guessing that it's more related to if a college student was looking to jump into the startup world, or perhaps advice about leading up to startups. So let me phrase it this way for you, Teague.
Mm-hmm.
If you could go back to school and give yourself a piece of advice and have it stick, what would it be?
So that formulation of the question always makes me a little bit, it makes it a little harder to answer, because like I wouldn't actually go back and change anything about my life. I don't have regrets. There are things that I can say like, well,
yes, thank you, Mister. I'm taking the question so flipping literally. I'm just asking if you could take a 19-year-old college student who's vaguely you-ish, although perhaps less nerdy, good Lord, and give him or her a piece of advice.
It's not hard.
What would you
it's not hard
say?
To be less nerdy.
You contemptuous pain in my ass.
How about this one? I'll give you the advice that I was giving to a college student just the other day, actually, I would say, I think there's a lot of value in joining startups at the beginning of your career. I think, one of the things that's important to remember is that a lot of learning happens in college, but it doesn't end in college. And particularly at the beginning of our careers, learning is probably more important than earning, right? And so we want to, it can be incredibly valuable to continue to invest in your education. And I'm not talking about grad school. I'm talking about getting yourself in opportunities or in situations where you can continue to learn things. You can try new things. You get opportunities. You're not insulated by, 6 layers of management from actually having any contact with the market or with customers. And at startups, you get to do that, right? If we talked about, as startups are tiny and they're growing, they oftentimes will choose enthusiasm over talent. And so you get a chance to do things you wouldn't get to do in a larger company, right? Partly because, the startup doesn't have enough people to do all the stuff. And so if you're willing to give it a shot, you might get to, but also because the startup doesn't have as much to protect, right? They don't have a multi-million-dollar brand or a cash cow that they're trying to protect. And so they're not going to put all these layers of management that can say no. There may be only one layer of management, and they might be more likely to just say yes. So you get to try things, and getting to try things is a great way to learn. You have to actually learn from those things you're trying, right? Which is another piece of it. So figuring out, knowing how to learn from your failures is an important thing, because as we've discussed before on the show, failure without learning is just failure.
It just means you suck.
Yeah. That's one of my pet peeves is the celebration of failure in the absence of learning. Is just, we want to actually celebrate the learning that comes out of it, not the failure itself.
Yeah. Well, and I think that those are absolutely important. And in fact, if you could go back and tell young Mr. Teague Hopkins that, I hope you would. Just saying that. Okay. Yeah. My piece of advice in this particular arena would actually be in that vein as well. My focus would be to failing, and it's more than just learning to fail. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you going to say something?
I was going to say it dropped out for me. I don't know if it dropped out for anybody else.
Good.
Did you guys hear Jason's advice?
I'll repeat it.
Okay, repeat it.
Because I failed apparently at it, which is actually what I was saying. Learn to be good at failure. Like learn to not just to embrace it from a 20,000 foot view of, I love failing. Failing means we learned, and then avoiding it as much as possible. When we're kids, riding a bike is a perfect example. You fail constantly at learning to ride a bike until you figure out how to ride a damn bike. You fall over, you scrape your knee, you bust your arm, whatever, but you keep doing it until you learn how to do it. Unless there are those kids who got really afraid of doing it and never learned how to ride a bike. And now it's actually too late. Now they can't ride a bike because they're so self-conscious as adults. And this has been proven that as you get older, it becomes so much harder to learn to ride a bicycle. And I think by extension, it's harder, not impossible. I didn't say impossible.
Yep.
I said harder. Learn to listen to me, damn it. Never listen.
I was waiting. I waited.
You were waiting. I think that it's important to learn how to fail on the road to finding success, because otherwise you end up in a place where you're constantly afraid of taking risks, and you're constantly in the playing the safe cards, which is fine. There are people who live their whole lives never taking risks. What's the fun in that? Where's the joy in that? Where's the adventure in that?
Yeah, and it takes us back to the top of the show where we talked about Kiki's article about embarrassment.
Yeah,
I think that's I mean, if you think about it on the scale of like, how long will you stay embarrassed? Probably not very long. If it's absolutely terrible, maybe a week, maybe even a month. But like the learning that comes from that is going to last you your entire life. So if we think about it as like an investment, it's still a no-brainer, right? Like you can be the most embarrassed you've ever been, and it's still probably worth the learning that came out of it.
Oh, sure. But the only time those embarrassments come back to you is either the kind of silly stuff that family remembers that gets brought up for 30 flipping years, because we all have that. And when you're in the shower and it's just you by yourself going, oh my God, I can't believe I said that. Like, that's really the long-term results of it. I mean, you actually very rarely does anybody embarrass themselves to the point where people remember for so long that it follows them forever. Those kinds of stories. I mean, even the big stuff, the woman who tweeted something vaguely racist and they got on a plane for 10 hours and had no internet, or, you know, the people who tweet pictures of themselves they don't mean to, and it ends up embarrassing them unless they're a politician. I mean, you have to be in such a specific situation. And even those instances, generally speaking, they come from what people should know to be bad choices, and they choose to ignore the potential consequences anyway. Not, I'm trying to build something or do something really interesting, and I just screwed up. Right. Those aren't the same thing. And right. If you try to build something and bring value, no failure is truly a failure. It's just a step towards the right thing.
Yeah, and it's worth also remembering that if people are criticizing you for having failed at something, you're the one who actually tried something. They're just sitting back and criticizing it. So who cares about them anyway? Of course,
my response. Go ahead.
As easy as it is to know that intellectually, it's a lot harder to know that, you know, emotionally.
Right.
So that's that's fair.
My response to anybody who said that would be to say, "Fuck you, you try it." Like, give me a break. I was hoping for a spit take there. I didn't get it. I was disappointed.
You keep hoping for a spit take. It hasn't happened yet. One of these days,
it will eventually. I'm pulling
I believe
for
in
it. I believe in me too. Just so we're clear. Yeah, I don't know. I think we get a little too crazy about the fear of failure, and that's what prevents us from taking a risk in the first place. And I'm sure that many smarter people have written much more about it and have said many more interesting things about it. But the truth is, in any space, we're all afraid of failure. We're all afraid of the embarrassment of it. Not the end of the world.
Yeah. Yeah, and in fact, actually, if we want to talk about sort of the broader advice that I'd give to somebody coming out of college, it's learn about the ego and about ego risks and cognitive biases and how that prevents you from achieving the things you want to achieve, because that's applicable in business and well beyond, right? And I think that having some kind of an introspective practice where you actually look at teach yourself to look at the objective truth of the situation instead of the lens through which you are viewing it, i.e. the ego, you can have a lot more success and feel a lot better about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and ego is a touchy subject. I think a lot of people have some specific feelings about themselves and how they interact. And my ego is pretty healthy. I'm okay with it, but some people need a little help. I don't know. It's just me.
I think we all need a little help from time to time.
Oh my God, I need too much. I realized after many years that my ego was actually sometimes covering up my incredible, bottomless pit of despair. But this is not therapy. There's a question in the chat. Are we saying that it's better to have a big ego than to be successful? No. Let me be clear. That is not what we're saying.
Yeah. So one of the things that I probably should have started with when I talk about ego, I don't mean the colloquial sense of ego as in like arrogance. I mean ego as in the
not the id and not the superego.
Right. It's the portion of the brain that has to do with reality testing. Right.
Right.
For more on that, you can check out this talk from
you,
the MVP conference. Yeah. Mm-hmm. My talk from the MVP conference, all about ego and ego risk and as it relates to innovation.
Teague, as somebody who has so very little ego, I don't know that you're an authority to speak about that. I feel like I should put that out there. Yeah, I don't know where that one was going. Okay.
I think that was a good thing. Yeah, I'll take it.
Sure. It's like Arrested Development. Anyway. Please tell me you've seen Arrested Development.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Anne, the one that is like George Michael's girlfriend? Never mind.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sure.
If you got the reference, let me know, because otherwise I'm just going to stop using these kinds of references, those of you in the audience. Anyway.
Sounds good. It's a shibboleth.
It's a shibboleth. Thank you. Somebody's been watching West Wing again.
Am I ever not watching West Wing? It's just on loop, right? Just constantly.
You know what? It should be. The shibboleth episode, the debate episodes are always good. Gosh, we could do an entire blab dedicated to that.
We could, and nobody would watch.
It's true. Anyway,
so one more article from our
go
list.
For it.
How about this one? How about screw finding your passion? This show is about loving what you do. Here's a counterpoint, sort of, maybe. The TLDR version of this is screw finding your passion. You already know what your passion is. You're just choosing to ignore it because it's not realistic. Why does everyone have to love their job instead of doing a job and loving their hobbies? No job is perfect. A child does not walk onto a playground and say to herself, how do I find fun? She just goes and has fun.
That was one of the most emotionless readings of something that was truly joyous I've ever heard. Hello, how do I find fun? This is what a child says when they go on the playground. You read it like it was a dictionary entry. Good Lord.
Well, I'm not the theater guy. I'll have you read it next time.
You should have been a theater guy. No, we've talked about this before, right? There's a common thing, do what you love is a big push right now, and it's the WeWork motto, and I disagree with it personally.
Yeah, well, and just let's start from a place of like, if you have the opportunity to think about doing what you love, you are already in an extraordinarily privileged position, right?
Right.
You can think about the kind of work you want to do instead of simply like the work you can get so that you can put food on the table and a roof over your head, right? Yeah. So let's start off by saying like, okay, we're acknowledging that for most people it's not even an option.
Right.
For the people who do have it as an option, Jason, your take would be like, forget about that. Don't even try to do what you love or love what you do.
It's not that. If you are one of the rare people whose day-to-day job is something that they love so much that they would do it for free if they could, that's incredibly rare. I mean, I love my job, but I don't necessarily love every aspect of it, and it doesn't satisfy me creatively the way that acting once did. But I love what I do. I love what I do. I love my business. I love my employees. I love the culture that we've built. I love the environment in which we work. I love the challenges that come with this job. It's not the same thing as loving painting or loving art or music or, I don't know, like when you're a kid and you love construction machines, whatever. Like, it's just not the same thing. I think oftentimes we get so wrapped up in the idea that we have to find our passion. Our passion isn't necessarily going to be the thing that puts food on the table, but what does put food on the table should be something that we can love and embrace, maybe distinctly, maybe the same thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think we sort of agree on this one, and I think we've talked about before the idea that you shouldn't do something you hate, but that doesn't mean that you have to only do the thing that you love inherently, right? You can love what you are doing instead of trying to do only the thing that you love. And sometimes because, if you take something that you love as a hobby and try to make it a business, you end up hating it.
That is totally true. Well, CJ asks, what if you have too many passions? And the answer is...
I love this question.
Yeah, the answer is awesome. Embrace as many of them as you can. I mean, you do have to prioritize at a certain point, but just, find the things that are most interesting and start with that.
Yeah, I think this is one of those. The ideal used to be sort of the Renaissance man of knowing a little bit about everything and sort of having all of these different interests and finding opportunities for innovation on the edges between them. And I think recently we have swung more towards a world in which specialization is highly valued, and a lot of that is probably due to industrial revolution, ability to actually specialize and the way that our economy is shifting. But that doesn't mean that everybody has to be a specialist, right? We still need generalists, and I think that a lot of there's a disproportionate number of generalists like to gravitate towards entrepreneurship. Because it gives us the opportunity to do a little bit of everything. It actually, we actually have the option to try a little bit of marketing, a little bit of tech, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And that's great for those of us who have known for a long time that we are definitely generalists. We like all kinds of different things and we don't want to specialize and go deep in one area.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think in the end, to answer CJ's question more comprehensively, if you're lucky that you have a lot of passions and you can pursue them, do that. I mean, don't necessarily make it your job. Don't make it your day-to-day work, because then you may decide you hate it. I pursued acting until I realized that working in acting was going to make me hate acting. So I stopped because working in acting was not as important to me as acting, but that's my story. I mean, you may find a thing that manages to bridge those gaps, and you'll be perfectly happy doing it. And that's great. More power to you. But that's not for everybody. It wasn't for me. So,
yeah.
There you have it. Well, Teague, we've got 5 minutes left.
CJ.
Yeah, thanks. We got a few minutes left. Aside from jumping into another article, is there anything else on your mind that you want to share or discuss or just ruminate on? I guess not.
I have no thoughts. Yeah.
Okay.
My mind is empty.
Indeed. Well, then I will take this opportunity to just remind everybody, because those of you who are listening after the fact, it won't apply quite as much. But for those of you listening now, if you're at all interested in learning more about National Entrepreneurs Day, I would love to send everybody to the link here, entrepreneursday.org, so you can learn all about, the holiday, and whether it's something you want to support or not. It's certainly something that I think is worth considering. I certainly wouldn't tell you one way or the other, because that part's not my job. In general, I think, as we said at the top of the show, we're here to entertain. We're here to provide some thoughts and responses. But I'd like to take the last minute or so just to remind everybody that there are still, a lot of crazy things happening in the world, and to stay safe, and to make sure that you take a minute to appreciate that for many of us, we are in a uniquely safe and wonderful position, and that, not everybody gets to be that way. So make sure you enjoy that and do something valuable with it. That's pretty much it. I don't really have a joke to follow that one. Thanks.
Yeah, no, that's well said.
Thanks. Well, I think with that, T, why don't we just go ahead and we'll call it a day. I don't want to ruin things by making a stupid joke.
Yeah, no, I think I agree.
Okay.
For folks who are looking to connect with you afterwards, Jason, where can they find you online?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Jason Nellis, or you can email me at my company's email address, jason@brllnt.co. That's jason@brilliant, without the vowels.co. Teague, where can everybody find you on the internet?
You can find me at TeagueHopkins or at TeagueHopkins.com. That's at TeagueHopkins on Twitter, or TeagueHopkins.com on the interwebs.
Ah, yes. It's just a series of tubes.
And of course, they can find more information about our show at StartupJab.com. You can also sign up for our mailing list, where we will actually tell you what day we are going to be broadcasting on, because it's been a little wacky recently. So hopefully you guys haven't been too confused by the changes to the schedule. Hopefully it's just been us.
Yes, exactly. In the meantime, we appreciate you listening. We hope you guys have an opportunity to come join us in the future. We'll be announcing next week's episodes and the ones after shortly. We may take next week off for Thanksgiving. We haven't 100% decided yet. But in the event that we're around, I know, right? But in the event that we're around, we hope that you'll join us. Teague, play us out, buddy.